She woke up to the soft light of early morning filtering through the curtains, the quiet of the house pressing in on her. The world outside seemed unchanged, as if life continued on without notice, but inside her chest a storm raged. Today was different, though she couldn't yet put a finger on why. The air felt heavier, carrying an invisible weight that she could not shake. She rubbed her eyes and looked around the room, noticing the small signs of life she and her father had shared over the years. A cup left on the counter, a worn chair by the window, a scarf draped over the back of the sofa. Every little object reminded her of him. Her father had always been a quiet presence, steady and dependable. He had a way of making her feel safe even when life was uncertain. From morning coffee to evening walks, the rhythm of their days had a comforting pattern. He would often sit beside her when she was lost in thought, offering gentle advice without pressure, guiding her through decisions with a calm voice that carried certainty. There had been laughter too, plenty of it, the kind that made her stomach ache and left her cheeks sore, the kind that lingered long after the sound faded. Those moments seemed like a lifetime ago now. She could still remember the mornings they spent in the kitchen, the aroma of fresh bread and coffee mingling with the soft hum of the radio. Her father would hum along to the tunes, his eyes twinkling with amusement as she tried to match the rhythm. He had a way of making ordinary days feel special, like each one held a hidden treasure just waiting to be discovered. Sometimes he would surprise her with a small note, tucked under a plate or slipped into her pocket, reminding her to smile or to be kind to herself. She realized now how those tiny gestures had shaped her sense of comfort and security, but today there was an emptiness she could not ignore. The house felt colder, the light dimmer. Her father had fallen ill unexpectedly, and the hospital had become a place she knew all too well. She had sat by his side for countless hours, holding his hand as machines beeped and monitors flickered, wishing she could take his pain away. She remembered the softness of his skin, the warmth of his fingers curling around hers, and the sound of his voice, strained but still reassuring. She had tried to stay strong, to believe that he would pull through, but deep down she knew the truth. When he passed, the world had shifted. The walls of the house, once familiar and comforting, seemed foreign and unwelcoming. Every corner held a memory, every object a reminder of what had been lost. She wandered from room to room, touching the things he had left behind, feeling both connected and painfully aware of his absence. The sofa where he used to sit, the chair by the window where he liked to read, the kitchen table where they had shared countless meals, all now silent witnesses to a life that had ended too soon. She tried to keep busy, thinking that movement might distract her from the ache in her heart. She folded laundry, washed dishes, and tidied the rooms, but nothing could fill the void. Each task seemed hollow without him there to share it. She found herself lingering over objects, picking up a mug, a book, or a sweater, and remembering the moments they had shared. She could almost hear his voice, soft and steady, offering reassurance and love, but it was only an echo fading quickly into the silence. At times she felt a wave of anger rise within her. Why had this happened? Why had he been taken from her when there was still so much life to live together? She scolded herself for feeling angry, for not being able to simply accept the loss. Grief was complicated, she realized, a mix of sorrow, confusion, and longing that had no easy answers. She allowed herself to sit with the feelings, letting the tears come freely, understanding that this was part of the process, part of finding a way to live in a world without him. She found comfort in small routines even as they felt empty without him. She brewed his favorite coffee each morning, inhaling the familiar aroma, and set a cup at the table as if he might still join her. She played his favorite music, letting the notes fill the rooms, hoping they might carry some sense of him back into the space. She talked to him sometimes, softly as if he could hear her, sharing thoughts and memories, confessing fears and regrets. The act of speaking aloud gave her a sense of connection, even when she knew he was gone. Friends and family reached out, offering support, but she often found it difficult to accept. Words of comfort felt distant, as though they could not penetrate the barrier of her grief. She appreciated their presence, yet a part of her longed for him alone, for the quiet understanding that existed between them. She remembered how he would listen without judgment, how he would offer advice without insisting on a particular path. That kind of presence was irreplaceable, and she felt its absence keenly. One afternoon she sat by the window, watching the world move on outside. Children played in the yard, neighbors chatted on porches, and cars passed by without pause. Life went on, as it always had, and yet she felt trapped in a moment that refused to move. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the room, and she realized she had been holding her breath, waiting for something she could not name. She longed for a sign, a word, anything that might remind her that he was still near in some way. In the days that followed, she began to notice small details she had overlooked before. The way the light fell on the bookshelf, the scent of his aftershave lingering faintly on a jacket, the quiet creak of the floorboards in the hallway. Each reminder brought a mixture of comfort and pain, a bittersweet acknowledgement that he had been here and that he was no longer. She started to keep a journal, writing down memories, thoughts, and feelings, as if documenting a conversation with him that could never truly end. She also revisited photographs, old letters and keepsakes that he had left behind. Each item told a story, a fragment of a life shared together. She smiled through tears as she read notes he had written, words of encouragement and little jokes only she would understand. These treasures became her lifeline, a way to feel close to him when the world felt overwhelmingly empty. She began to understand that grief was not about forgetting, but about carrying love forward in a new form. Nights were the hardest. The silence of the house pressed in around her, and the absence of his presence was most keenly felt. She would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, remembering conversations, laughter, and quiet moments of understanding. Sometimes she could almost feel his hand on hers, steady and warm, guiding her through the dark. It was both comforting and painful, a reminder that love did not end with death even as loss remained. She realized that she needed to find a way to live with the pain, to honor his memory while moving forward. It was not about forgetting him or pushing grief aside, but about learning to carry it gently, allowing it to be part of her life without consuming her. She began to take small steps, going for walks, reaching out to friends, and slowly engaging with the world again. Each step was difficult, yet each one carried the memory of his love, guiding her toward healing. As days turned into weeks, she began to notice a shift within herself. The raw pain of loss remained, but it was accompanied by a growing sense of gratitude for the time they had shared. She remembered the lessons he had taught, the values he had instilled, and the countless ways he had shown love. She realized that his presence, though no longer physical, was still woven into the fabric of her life, offering guidance, comfort, and strength in ways she had not yet fully recognized. One morning she found herself sitting in the garden, the sun warming her face, and she felt a quiet sense of peace. She remembered how he had loved the small details of life, the way the light hit a flower, the sound of birds in the morning, the laughter that came from simple joys. She realized that these were the threads that connected her to him, that kept his spirit alive within her. In that moment she felt a spark of hope, a gentle reminder that love endured, even in the face of loss. Though the pain of losing him would never fully disappear, she understood that life continued, and that she had the strength to carry forward. She could honor his memory by embracing the lessons he had taught her, cherishing the love they had shared, and finding moments of joy and connection in the world around her. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of grief and the warmth of memory intertwined, and knew that she was beginning a journey that would allow her to heal, step by step, day by day, carrying her father's love within her always. She spent hours going through the small treasures he had left behind. Old letters, photographs, and worn-out notebooks filled the space around her as she sat cross-legged on the living room floor. Each item seemed to carry a piece of him, a memory frozen in time. She picked up a photograph of them together at a small park, her father smiling as he held her on his shoulders. The memory came rushing back, the sound of the wind, the smell of the grass, the warmth of his arms holding her steady. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled through them, remembering how safe and loved she had felt. She found an old journal he had kept filled with notes, thoughts, and small reminders to himself. Flipping through the pages, she realized how much of him was captured in these simple words. He had written about his hopes, his fears, and his love for her. She felt a pang of regret for not knowing him more deeply when he was alive, for taking his presence for granted. Yet as she read, she could sense the care he had taken to live a life of thoughtfulness and love. She held the journal close, as if holding a part of him against her chest. Memories kept coming in waves, both joyful and bittersweet. She remembered the nights he had stayed awake with her when she was sick, the mornings he had helped her with school projects, and the quiet evenings they had spent watching the sunset together. He had always been there, silently supporting her, guiding her without making her feel pressured. Those memories now felt precious, fragile, and painfully irreplaceable. Sometimes she would hear his voice in her mind, gentle and calming. It would remind her of small advice he had given, words about patience, kindness, and believing in herself. She whispered them aloud, talking to him in the empty room. It helped her feel closer to him, even though the loss still ached. She wished she could hear his laughter again, see the way his eyes would light up at something silly, or feel the comfort of his hand on hers. All of those things were gone, and she had to face the reality of a life without him. She began to explore more of the things he had left behind. There were letters written to her long before he passed, some she had never seen. Each one was filled with encouragement, love, and wisdom. She read about the times he had felt proud of her, the moments he wanted her to remember, and the lessons he hoped she would carry into her life. Each letter felt like a conversation across time, his words reaching out to guide her even now. She smiled and cried as she read, feeling both the pain of his absence and the warmth of his love. She also discovered small gifts he had left, meant to be found later. A tiny box with a necklace, a note tucked inside saying, "For when you need a reminder that I am with you." Another letter encouraged her to pursue her dreams, not to fear mistakes, and to always stay true to herself. She realized that even in his final days, he had thought about how to comfort her, how to leave her with pieces of himself to hold on to. She felt a profound mixture of sorrow and gratitude, understanding that he had prepared her for life without him in a way that only he could. As she continued to go through his things, she began to notice patterns in his writing and his thoughts. He had always emphasized the importance of remembering the good, even in times of pain, and finding small moments of joy. She reflected on her own life and realized how much of that guidance she had neglected. He had been teaching her to live fully, even without realizing it, and now it was up to her to carry those lessons forward. The thought was both daunting and comforting, a challenge she felt ready to take on in his memory. During this time, she found herself talking about him more openly with friends and family. They shared stories, laughed at memories, and sometimes cried together. Each conversation helped her process her grief and gave her a sense of connection to him, even though he was gone. She realized that sharing memories kept his presence alive, allowing her to feel his influence in the lives of those who had known him as well. It was as if he continued to touch the world through the love he had spread while alive. There were moments, though, when grief would strike unexpectedly. Walking through the park where they had spent so much time, hearing a song they both loved or smelling the scent of his cologne on an old sweater would bring her to her knees. Tears would come unbidden, and she would feel a deep ache in her heart. Yet she began to understand that these moments were a sign of love, not weakness. Her grief was a testament to the bond they had shared, a bond that did not end with death. She also spent time reflecting on conversations they had had, sometimes replaying them in her mind. She remembered advice he had given about making decisions, being kind, and facing challenges with courage. She realized how often he had prepared her for life without explicitly saying so. The love he had shown was practical as well as emotional, teaching her resilience and strength alongside tenderness and care. These reflections gave her a sense of direction, a map to navigate a world that suddenly felt uncertain and fragile. At night, she would often sit in the living room, surrounded by his belongings, and talk to him quietly. She spoke of her fears, her hopes, and the small victories of the day. Sometimes she felt a comforting warmth, a sense that he was listening, even if only in spirit. She clung to these moments, understanding that grief was not just about mourning, but also about maintaining a connection that could continue in new ways. The act of speaking kept his memory alive, and in return it gave her solace. She began to notice little signs that reminded her of him. A feather on the ground, a song playing unexpectedly, or a breeze brushing her cheek at the right moment. These small occurrences felt like gentle nudges from him, reminders that he was still watching over her, still part of her world in ways she could not fully explain. Each sign brought comfort, a reassurance that love endures even after someone is gone. Through this process, she began to heal slowly. She understood that grief was not a straight path, that some days would be harder than others, and that was okay. She learned to be patient with herself, to accept the pain alongside the love, and to carry forward his lessons in her daily life. She found that as she honored his memory, she was also honoring herself. Embracing the part of him that lived within her, each day became a balance of sorrow and gratitude, a mixture of missing him and feeling his presence. One evening, she found an old recording of his voice, speaking softly, telling stories and sharing thoughts. Listening to it brought a rush of emotions, love, nostalgia, sorrow, and comfort all at once. His words seemed to fill the room, creating a presence she could feel and almost touch. She cried, laughed, and whispered her responses, feeling a connection that transcended the boundaries of life and death. It was a reminder that while he was gone physically, the essence of who he was remained with her. She also began to take small actions in his memory. She cooked the meals he loved, tended to the garden they had worked on together, and kept traditions alive that they had shared. Each action was a way to honor him, to feel close, and to keep the spirit of their bond alive. These routines brought structure, comfort, and a sense of purpose, helping her navigate a world that had once seemed overwhelmingly empty. Over time, she started to find joy again, small sparks that reminded her of life's beauty. She laughed at memories, marveled at moments of serendipity, and took comfort in the love that remained. Grief was still present, but it became a companion rather than a chain, something she carried with her as she moved forward. She understood that love does not end with death. It transforms, becoming a guiding force in the way she lived, thought, and connected with others. The journey through grief taught her the value of presence, connection, and reflection. She realized that each memory, each object, and each conversation was a gift, a way to keep him alive in her heart. She learned to cherish the past while embracing the present, carrying forward the love, wisdom, and kindness he had given her. With each passing day, she grew stronger, more resilient, and more aware of the lasting impact of a life well lived and a love deeply shared. One rainy afternoon, as she sorted through a drawer in the study, she found a small, folded envelope tucked beneath a pile of papers. It was unmarked except for her name, written in her father's familiar handwriting. Her heart skipped a beat and a rush of emotion swept through her. She gently unfolded the paper inside, unsure what to expect. The letter was handwritten, careful and deliberate, as if he had written it knowing she would one day find it. She could feel the presence of his thoughts, the love and care behind every word. The letter began with a reminder of how proud he had always been of her, of the small and big things alike. He spoke of memories they had shared, the lessons he had tried to teach her, and the values he hoped she would carry forward. Reading the words, she felt as if he was speaking directly to her, reaching across the divide of life and death. The pain of missing him remained, but the warmth of his love now filled the space where emptiness had been. She held the letter close to her chest, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "I miss you." He had written about strength, kindness, and the importance of believing in herself. He reminded her not to be afraid of mistakes because they were a part of learning and growing. His words encouraged her to embrace life fully, to find joy even in small moments, and to let love guide her decisions. She marveled at how he had anticipated her grief, offering her a message that was both comforting and empowering. It was as if he had known that one day she would need these words to move forward. There were also instructions of sorts, gentle suggestions to help her cope with the days when sadness might feel overwhelming. He encouraged her to keep a journal, to write letters to him even when he could not answer, and to allow herself to feel her emotions without judgment. Each line spoke to the deep understanding he had of her heart, and she felt a mix of sorrow and gratitude. Even in his absence, he had given her tools to heal and to carry his love with her. The letter also contained memories he cherished, small stories meant to make her smile. He recounted times they had laughed together, moments of mischief and simple joys they had shared. She could hear his voice in her mind as she read, the gentle cadence, the humor hidden in his words. It was as though he had reached out from beyond to remind her that their bond was unbroken, that love did not end even when life did. After finishing the letter, she felt a sense of peace she had not experienced since his passing. The ache of loss was still there, but it was mingled with a comforting warmth. She realized that he had left her not only memories but guidance and reassurance, a way to navigate life while keeping his love close. It was a gift more valuable than anything she could have imagined. The next days were different. She began to notice small signs around her, subtle reminders of him. A certain bird would appear when she was feeling sad, A song would play at the right moment, or a breeze would brush her cheek unexpectedly. Each moment felt like a whisper from him, a reminder that his presence was still with her, not in a physical sense, but in ways that touched her heart. She started to see the world with new eyes, finding beauty and comfort in things she might have overlooked before. Encouraged by the letter, she took to writing letters of her own. She poured her thoughts, her fears, and her hopes onto paper, speaking to him as if he were reading every word. She wrote about her day, the challenges she faced, and the moments of joy she discovered. Writing became a ritual, a way to stay connected, to feel his guidance and love even when the world felt empty. Each letter she wrote helped her process grief and gradually transformed her sorrow into a quiet strength. One evening, she placed one of her letters on the windowsill, where she had found the envelope with his message. She felt a strange sense of closeness, as though by placing her words there she was sending them directly to him. The act brought her comfort, and she realized that even though he was gone, the bond they shared continued in this new form. It was a reminder that love was not bound by time or space, and that it could provide solace in ways she had never imagined. She also began to reflect on the lessons he had taught her in life. His patience, kindness, and empathy became guiding principles in her daily decisions. She found herself thinking, what would he do when faced with challenges, and it helped her navigate difficult situations. His wisdom, once subtle and quiet, now resonated loudly in her heart. She felt stronger, more capable, and more attuned to the world around her because of the way he had prepared her to live a meaningful life. The daughter also started seeking ways to honor his memory beyond the house. She volunteered at a local community center, helping children with reading and homework, remembering how he had always encouraged her to help others. She found joy in sharing knowledge and offering kindness and patience, just as he had done. Each act of service felt like a continuation of his spirit, a way to let his love ripple outward. She realized that by living the values he had instilled in her, she could keep him alive in her actions. As weeks passed, she found herself more open to the people around her. She shared stories of her father with friends and neighbors, talking about the lessons he had taught her and the love he had given. Others responded with warmth, sharing their own memories of him or expressing admiration for the person he had been. These interactions reminded her that he had touched many lives and that the love he shared was still present in the hearts of others. It gave her a sense of belonging, of being part of a larger story of love and care. Despite the comfort she found in the letter and in her reflections, there were still moments of intense sadness. She would awaken in the middle of the night, longing for his presence, or pause in a quiet room, feeling the weight of his absence. Yet each time, she drew strength from his words, the memories, and the small signs she believed were messages from him. She began to understand that grief was not something to be conquered, but something to be carried, and that carrying it with love allowed it to transform into something life-affirming. One rainy afternoon, as she walked through the park they had visited together so often, she felt a sudden sense of peace. The raindrops on her skin reminded her of the times he had held her umbrella, of the walks in the drizzle, and of the quiet conversations shared beneath the gray sky. She closed her eyes and remembered his words, feeling a gentle warmth in her heart. It was as though he had reached out through the letter and all the small signs to remind her that he was still with her, guiding her steps even in his absence. In her solitude, she began to meditate on the nature of love and memory. She realized that her father's gift was not just the letter or the keepsakes, but the life he had lived and the love he had shared. That love had shaped her, given her resilience, and taught her the meaning of connection and compassion. She understood that the presence of someone we love never truly disappears. It transforms and continues to influence us in ways that can be deeply comforting. The letter also inspired her to take risks and embrace her own dreams. She enrolled in courses she had always hesitated to pursue, started projects that challenged her, and allowed herself to explore creativity in ways she had never before. Each step forward felt like an acknowledgement of his belief in her, a continuation of the encouragement he had offered while alive. The message he had left was not only about coping with loss, but about living fully, and she took it to heart with determination and hope. As months passed, she began to see a transformation within herself. The grief was still present, but it no longer consumed her entirely. She carried it gently, allowing it to remind her of the depth of her love and the lessons she had learned. She felt her father's guidance in everyday moments, in choices big and small, and in the way she treated others. She realized that his final gift was not just the letter, but the enduring impact of his love, which would continue to shape her life forever. The discovery of the letter became a turning point. It reminded her that even in death, love could reach across time and distance, providing comfort, guidance, and hope. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a commitment to live in a way that honored his memory, and the understanding that he was still with her in spirit. Each day became an opportunity to carry forward the love he had given, to let it touch her life and the lives of those around her. The letter had opened a door, and she stepped through it with courage, love, and a deep sense of connection. Days turned into weeks, and she began to see the world with a renewed sense of purpose. The letter her father had left her had opened a door, and now she walked through it with small, deliberate steps. She started to bring back traditions. They had shared simple things that made her feel close to him. She cooked his favorite meals, set the table as they had once done together, and even hummed the tunes he used to play in the kitchen. Each act was a quiet tribute, a way to keep his presence alive in the home. She also revisited places they had loved to go together. The park where they had spent afternoons, the little cafe where they shared warm drinks, and the quiet bookstore where he had once let her pick out a book all felt different now. They carried memories she could touch, smell, and see. Walking through them, she felt a strange comfort, as if he were beside her, guiding her, reminding her to breathe, to look around, and to notice the small joys of life. It was a feeling that made her chest ache, but in a good way, a mix of love and sorrow intertwined. Her friends noticed a change in her. She laughed more freely, though sometimes tears still came unexpectedly. She shared stories of her father with them, recounting the lessons he had taught and the warmth he had brought to every room he entered. They listened, some with tears in their eyes, others with smiles, and she realized that sharing memories kept his spirit alive. It was a gentle reminder that grief could be shared and softened by connection, and that love could continue to ripple outward, touching others as it once had him. She started journaling more consistently, capturing memories, thoughts, and letters to him. Writing became a sacred ritual, a way to communicate with him in her own private space. Some days she poured out her sadness, other days her gratitude. And sometimes she wrote about small joys, like the first blossom of spring or the laughter of a stranger passing by. In each word, she felt his presence, a gentle guiding hand reminding her to keep moving forward, to embrace life fully, and to find beauty in both the big and small moments. In quiet moments, she would often sit by the window, watching the world outside, feeling a soft connection to him. The way the light hit the garden reminded her of afternoons they had spent planting flowers together. The sound of birds singing in the morning echoed the times they had shared long walks, listening to the chirping and the rustle of leaves. Nature had become a channel through which she felt closest to him, a reminder that life, like love, continues even when we cannot see it clearly. She also began helping others in subtle ways, small acts of kindness inspired by her father's lessons. She would help neighbors with chores, volunteer at a local shelter, or simply listen to a friend in need. Each act felt like a continuation of his spirit, a way to honor him through action. She realized that this was part of his message to her, to let love flow outward, to touch lives as he had touched hers. It gave her a sense of purpose, and slowly, the heavy weight of grief began to lift, replaced by a feeling of connection and fulfillment. Sometimes the nights were still the hardest. She would wake in the dark, longing for the comfort of his presence, for the sound of his voice or the warmth of his hand on hers. Yet even in these moments she felt the lessons he had left her, the encouragement, the guidance, and the love. She learned to embrace the quiet, to speak to him softly in the dark, and to allow the tears to come when they needed to. Each night became a small act of remembrance and healing, a chance to reaffirm the bond they shared, even across the divide of life and death. She noticed that even mundane things reminded her of him. A certain way the sunlight fell on the floor, a favorite song on the radio, or a particular flower blooming in the garden seemed to carry his message. These small signs were subtle, but they brought reassurance and comfort, a gentle reminder that he was still present in her life in ways that went beyond sight and touch. She began to trust these signs, to take them as encouragement to keep moving forward, and to cherish the love that remained. She also reflected on the times she had taken for granted when he was alive. She realized how many small gestures of love and care had gone unnoticed, and how important it was to notice the beauty in everyday life. These reflections helped her cultivate gratitude, not only for the time she had with him but for the life she still had. She began to focus on the present, embracing moments as they came, understanding that each day was a gift to be treasured, just as he had always taught her. The lessons in his letter and the memories she held dear began to shape her decisions. She approached challenges with a new sense of confidence, often thinking, "What would he want me to do?" When faced with uncertainty, this perspective helped her navigate difficulties with grace and resilience. She found herself more patient with others, more understanding, and more willing to give love without expectation. It was as if his guidance had become a compass for her life, pointing her toward the values he had always cherished. She also began to reconnect with her own passions, the things she had once set aside. She started painting again, something her father had always encouraged, and felt joy in expressing herself through colors and shapes. She took walks in nature, wrote poetry, and explored creative ideas she had long neglected. Each act of self-expression felt like a tribute to him, a way to honor his belief in her potential and to keep the creativity he admired alive within herself. It became clear that her growth and happiness were part of the gift he had left her. One afternoon, she returned to the garden they had planted together. The flowers were blooming in vibrant colors, and the sunlight danced on the leaves. She knelt down, touching the soil and remembering how he had shown her to care for each plant with patience and attention. She smiled through tears, feeling his presence strongly in that quiet space. It was a reminder that nurturing life, even in small ways, kept love alive. She promised herself to continue tending not only the garden but also her relationships, her dreams, and her own heart, carrying forward his lessons in love. Friends and neighbors noticed the changes in her. She had become more open, compassionate, and serene. People were drawn to her warmth and understanding, and she often shared stories of her father, the lessons he taught, and the ways he had influenced her life. She realized that by talking about him and living in accordance with his values, she was keeping his memory alive and allowing others to benefit from his wisdom as well. The ripple effect of his love continued, touching lives in subtle but meaningful ways. She also began to understand that grief and love could coexist. She no longer tried to push away the sadness, but instead embraced it alongside the joy and gratitude she felt. She learned to carry both in her heart, understanding that sorrow was a reflection of deep love and that love could sustain her even in the absence of the person she missed. This realization brought a profound sense of peace, a quiet acceptance that life was a mixture of light and shadow, and that both were necessary for growth. In quiet moments, she would look at the letter again, reading passages that had particularly comforted her. Each reading brought new insights, new feelings, and a deeper connection to her father. She began to feel that the letter was not just a message but a living presence, a source of guidance that would continue to influence her life in subtle and profound ways. The love contained in those words had become a foundation, supporting her as she navigated the complexities of life without him physically present. As she continued her journey, she began to find joy in helping others navigate their challenges as well. She offered advice, comfort, and understanding, sharing the lessons her father had taught her. She realized that in giving love, she was honoring his memory, and in touching lives, she was carrying forward the impact he had made. Her own life became richer, filled with purpose, compassion, and connection, as she integrated his teachings into her actions and choices. Slowly, the house that had once felt empty and cold began to feel alive again. It carried the echoes of laughter, memories of shared moments, and the warmth of love that had never truly left. She moved through the rooms with a sense of reverence and gratitude, noticing the small signs of his presence in everyday objects and routines. Each step she took was guided by his memory, and each act of care she offered herself or others became a testament to the enduring power of his love. In time, she began to feel a sense of wholeness, The grief remained, but it was no longer a weight that pulled her down. Instead, it became a part of the tapestry of her life, interwoven with love, memory, and hope. She knew that her father's guidance, his lessons, and his unwavering love had given her the tools to face life with courage and grace. And in that understanding she found peace, knowing that while he was gone from the physical world, his spirit and his love would continue to guide her, always present in the choices she made and the life she built. As time passed, she felt a quiet strength growing within her. The ache of loss was still present, but it had softened into a gentle reminder of love rather than a heavy burden. She carried the memories of her father like a light she could turn to whenever life felt dark. The lessons he had imparted, the laughter they had shared, and the small, thoughtful gestures he had made all lived on in her daily life. Each day, she found new ways to honor him and let his love guide her decisions. One morning, she visited the little park they had always enjoyed together. The air was crisp and the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden glow over the trees. She walked along the familiar paths, recalling the moments they had spent here, running, talking, and simply enjoying each other's company. She stopped at a bench where they had once sat, and placing her hand on it, she whispered a quiet thanks. It was her way of connecting, of acknowledging the impact he had had on her life and the guidance that continued to shape her days. She had begun to share her father's wisdom with others, especially with young people who reminded her of herself at their age. Whether it was through gentle advice, encouragement, or just listening with patience, she carried forward the lessons he had taught her. Each interaction became a way to extend his influence, to let the love he had given her ripple outward into the world. She discovered a deep satisfaction in helping others, knowing that in doing so she kept a part of him alive. Her home felt warmer now, filled with reminders of him that no longer caused only sorrow. She had organized his belongings in a way that honored his memory, placing photographs, letters, and mementos where she could see them daily. Each item told a story, each note carried a piece of his guidance, and each photograph captured a moment of joy. They no longer made her long for what was lost. Instead, they reminded her of the love that remained, ever present, ever guiding. She also found solace in quiet moments alone, moments when she could reflect, meditate, or simply sit with a sense of connection. She watched sunsets and marveled at the colors, feeling him beside her in spirit. She listened to the birds and remembered the walks they had taken, the small joys of discovering the world together. In these moments, she felt a profound sense of peace, as though his love was surrounding her, offering reassurance and comfort.